All right, hello. I'm David Montequin from the Lake Dallas Public Library, and in order to kick off National Novel Writing Month, or NaNoWriMo, I'm joined by the author Mir Foote, who is a local author and has published multiple books that are all available on her website, mirfoote.com. That's spelled MIRFOOTE.com. So, welcome, Mir Foote. Tell us a bit about yourself. When did you start writing? What got you into writing? And what exactly is it that you write?
Okay. Well, I started writing when I probably really started writing around the 4th grade.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was about 10 or so. Basically, when I was little, I was always making up stories. And people kept saying, oh, you should be a writer. And being a little kid, I went, okay. And so I kept writing. And I've looked back at some of that work, and I would not call that quality work. But it turns out if you keep writing for years and years and years and years, you start to get good at it. And so when eventually I started completing my books and publishing them. These are mostly juvenile fiction. There's like one, I actually have 2 poetry books. One of them's here, one's not. One picture book. Like these are for like 2nd or 3rd grade, or 2nd, 3rd grade. These, and then this one 4th grade, and these go up to like 5th and 6th, 7th. Although I don't just write for children, I have a lot of projects that I work on. I've been writing plays. I'm even writing a musical, and ignoring that I don't know how to write music. And I've been working on turning this into a graphic novel. Been thinking about turning some into audiobooks. So I have lots of projects going on.
That's great. So what about this particular age group of like anywhere from 2nd grade or juvenile all the way through 5th and 6th grade? What about that age group led you to write for that?
Part of it was my own age when I started writing. It was difficult to write about adults when I was still a child. Part of it is it's where the story leads me. I never set out to say, okay, now I'm going to write a book for 3rd graders. Now I'm going to write a book for this age demographic. I don't think about the demographic. I see where the story takes me. I do somewhat lean into trying to use vocabulary and structure that's appropriate for the book. But I don't necessarily set out and go, I'm going to write this. It's just where the story takes me.
Yeah. So with that being said about how you were drawn into writing about this age group, are there any particular books or authors that have inspired you the most, if at all? If there were no authors, then that's also okay.
There's quite a few authors. If I named them all, we'd be here forever. Some of my favorites, especially like Diana Jones. Winewind. I never know how to pronounce her middle name. But she's one of my favorite authors. And she also wrote a lot of juvenile fiction. And it showed me that I can enjoy her work even as an adult, and that juvenile does not have to mean bad writing. And one of the first books that I started reading, like when I was little, I loved Tolkien because my dad read me The Hobbit. So then I also like Terry Pratchett. Apparently I mostly like British authors. Those are probably the main authors that I would guess inspire me.
Yeah, and I think that's actually fascinating how you mentioned that like just it being juvenile doesn't mean it's bad writing. Because I think there's a problem amongst a lot of readers and writers where they think that there's this idea of like high fiction and low fiction or something, and so like high fiction is like the super like bougie writing that nobody actually reads, and then low writing is everything else. So I think it's fascinating that you bring that up. And so that leads me to my next question is, what is your favorite part of writing, and what to you is also the hardest part of writing?
Okay, kind of the same thing. My favorite thing is to uncover the story. When I set out to write a book, a lot of the times I don't necessarily know it from start, middle, end.
Mm-hmm.
I'll get an idea, I'll get to know the characters, that's always fun.
Mm-hmm.
But finishing it can also be very difficult, especially if the characters aren't going where you're wanting them to go,
Mm-hmm.
or if I haven't quite figured out where I want to go,
Mm-hmm.
then and I can have a short attention span. That's partly why it's so much easier to finish these than my adult novels or even young adult novels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's all very interesting. But now I want to know a little bit more specifically about your writing process. Given that this is National Novel Writing Month and a lot of people are going to be embarking on this project, how exactly would you describe your writing process? Do you create elaborate plans, or do you jump in head first? Are you somewhere in the middle? How do you do it?
Depends on the book.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, this one is time travel. I had to make charts. Especially, it's actually going to be a series. I needed to know where and when different people were in time travel. They meet each other out of order.
Yeah.
Sometimes this one started. The entire book started because I came up with the title, and I said, "Well, now I need a story to go with the title." Other books, I come up with the entire story, start to finish. It takes me ages to find the title. So it depends on the story, it depends on the book, but the longer the book, the longer the series, the more charts start to grow.
Gotcha. So has your writing process changed over the years? I know you talked about how you started writing very young. Has it changed as you gotten older and become more of an experienced writer?
Probably. I would say that my skill has advanced. But whenever I start a new story, it feels exactly the same. There's always that thrill of a new story, meeting new characters. In that way, not really.
Oh. That's actually really interesting, and it's definitely not the answer that I expected either. I always think that people are gonna say, "Oh yes, my writing has or my writing process has changed exponentially over the past 20 years." And then when you mentioned that meeting new characters, it has not changed at all. That's actually very cool. And so this leads me to my next question: is as an experienced writer, what do you wish you knew way back when you first started writing that you know now, if there's anything at all?
Formatting. I self-publish my books. If you manage to send them to a big publisher and they say, "Yes, we want you," that's great. Most people, that's not going to happen. And in this day and age, unless you're getting the big publisher, there's not a huge advantage to being published versus self-publishing. But the one advantage is formatting. I'll pick up some books that other people have self-published. I will know instantly it's self-published. I'll open it up. If you look at this, you open it up, blank page. Okay, they put that in. But you open it and you'll notice it starts here on this page, page 1.
Oh.
You open it. You have the copyright information on this side. I have a dedication on this side. Blank page. Table of contents.
Gotcha.
Blank page. You do not be afraid of the blank pages when you are formatting. And also you might notice, see, this took me ages to learn how to do and following a lot of instructions. And the first books didn't work quite right. But you'll notice a little space. There is a big space on this side. You don't notice it because it's in the crack. But you have to pay attention to what side of the page things are going to be on too.
Gotcha.
And I know that's not a big tip for the writing process, but for the self-publishing, that would have been really useful to know how to do those skills.
Yeah, and that's actually really cool and useful because I would have never thought about that at all. But that all sounds like quite a daunting process, but writing itself, I think is much more complex than just making a plan. I don't know if you think that way, but I think that way. And so I'd like to ask you, how do you view writing? For example, do you see it as an art? Do you see it as language? Do you see it as storytelling? Do you see it as something much deeper than those things? Do you see it as all of the above or none of the above? How do you see writing?
A bit of all of the above, really. And when it's kind of funny to mention language, because one of my hobbies is to make up languages. And I find it fascinating how very similar that is to actually making a story. It's not a story anyone reads or even notices, but the process is very similar. You find something here, you follow it to its conclusion here, and that's a bit what writing is like. It's art, it is storytelling, it's sharing a bit of yourself, really. All my best writing is the ones I'm almost too shy to share.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, so speaking of that, has writing directly or indirectly affected how you experience and interact with the world around you in any way?
It has changed my Google history. I am always searching the weirdest information. Like, I now know the difference between venom and poison, and I'm slightly afraid I'm on a list somewhere. But other than that, not really.
Yeah, it's like Big Brother is watching you now that you're getting into these Google searches. So, do you think writing sort of exists in a vacuum, or is it like a continuous process of like being and knowing and existing in this world for the author, and that being part of a much larger context of, say, the author's life or author's lived experiences? Or do you think it's something completely different than those two things?
Well, it's definitely not a vacuum. My experiences affect how I write. They affect the characters that I would follow in my stories. I would not put my experiences directly in, like, I get to know a character, and so I get to know how they think, and my experiences might affect that, that I'm not going to insert myself into it. And does that answer?
Yes, yeah, no, that's actually a great answer. And I do have a follow-up question to this. Is writing or storytelling or any of these things, do you view them as neutral activities within society, or are they very active? You don't?
They are active. They're reactive, they can incite change, they can affect people. For instance, representation. As a librarian, also, we work very hard to have representation of everyone. And books can reflect society, and they can also incite change in society.
Yeah, and so that leads me to another question, which I think you'd also mentioned something along the lines of it earlier, but one of the famous classic authors, Oscar Wilde, once said that the books that the world calls moral are the books that show the world its own shame. So what does that mean to you? Does it speak to your writing process or philosophy on writing, or is it counter to your philosophies on writing?
Well, I can say it's always been one of my greatest ambitions to be on a banned book list somewhere.
Oh yeah.
And I do like Oscar Wilde. At least I've only known the importance of being earnest.
Yeah. So, speaking of that, do you write with emotions? What would it mean to you to write with emotions, and how would you incorporate any given emotion or feeling or experience into your writing?
I try not to necessarily insert the emotion, but like, I let my characters experience what they experience. And I do know, like, for instance, in my poetry, that the ones that are the most me, the most real, or the ones that I feel the most shy about sharing, are the ones that people tend to point to as their favorites. So I think, and you do have to insert something in, like, be brave and bold and not just step back and be neutral, I guess.
Yeah. So, with all of that being said, Why would you say it is important to celebrate National Novel Writing Month? And why would you say it is critical for writing novels in general?
Okay. I would say it is critical because encouragement is always important.
Mm-hmm.
Inspiration is always important. And like I said, novels, writing in general,
Mm-hmm.
can change the world. It can show something to future generations of what we are now.
Mm-hmm.
And without that encouragement, there could be some great writers out there who step back and go, maybe one day,
Mm-hmm.
but not right now. And we'll never get to meet them. They'll never get to meet their characters or read their poetry or listen to their music because they didn't step up and they didn't have anyone pushing them to step up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually really like that answer about there are writers we will never meet if we don't celebrate National Novel Writing Month. That's so cool. So if you would like to participate in National Novel Writing Month or NaNoWriMo, please visit lakedallas.com/NaNoWriMo. That's spelled NaNoWriMo. Click on the link to the Google Drive and fill out the interest form, and I will reach out to you just before the start of the month. And so I'd like to give one final thank you to Mir Foote for being ever so gracious and allowing us to interview her. And do not forget, if you are interested in her books or more about her, you can find her at mirfoote.com, spelled MIRFOOTE.com. Thank you.
Thank you.